Hi VC, I'm back to do part two of my Krautrock collection. It's been almost 14 months, I'd say, since I did my part one. I thought I would have had all 4 or 5 parts that I've got to show of my Krautrock stuff done by now. However, with typical lethargy, I've just realised I've only done one installment. So right now I'm going to do the second one, and I hope in the coming weeks to wrap it up pretty quickly. Um, I got to get moving. I don't know what I've been doing. So for now, I'd like to basically go through what I have of Embryo, and Embryo are obviously a German krautrock band. They, to my ears anyway, they're certainly the most interesting of the krautrock bands that were out there. I know that the VC has got a preference and a predilection for Can, who are very much a sacred cow. I think, frankly, I find them a tad overrated. I much prefer the sound of Embryo, and I think they're a much more varied band. Obviously Apocalypso are huge favourites in the VC as well, but Embryo are head and shoulders my favourite, and I think the most interesting of all of the krautrock groups. So I've got a decent enough stack of their stuff. I've got everything that they released in the 1970s except for maybe 2 or 3 albums, one of which I'm definitely looking for. That's Risa, Embryo's Risa, which came out in 1979. You know, the one with the kind of the temple in Amritsar, one of those places. On the cover, you see a kind of a holy man jumping over something. I think it's called Risa. I also don't have Opal, which is their first album, and I also don't have Surfin', which is a highly forgettable album that they released in the mid-1970s. But I've got 6 or 7, or maybe 7 or 8 other pieces that they released in the 1970s. So who are they? Well, they started off as your typical krautrock psychedelic band with space rock leanings, and they eventually morphed very quickly, actually, into a kind of a world fusion band, and that kind of polemic has remained in their sound right up to date. They're still performing. The mainstay behind them is a guy called Christian Burchard, who is a multi-instrumentalist. He plays vibes, marimbas. He's a percussionist as well. He plays drums and he plays keyboard. So he's been kind of a mainstay for the group, along with a few other guys like Roman Bunka and a few others as well. They're still recording to this and still tour. They've released maybe over 30 or 40 albums. All I have got from them is stuff right up to the 1970s. I have nothing from there on in. You just don't see it around at all. So right at the very start, their first album, as I said, was Opal. That was released on, I think it was Or, and they had 6 or 7 different labels releasing their releases throughout the 1970s. They kind of moved around quite a bit. I know they set up their own label called April, which subsequently morphed into Shreeball, I think it was called, which the Risa one was released on. So okay, so without further ado, I don't have their first album Opal, which came out on Or. I've got their second and third ones, but not the original versions of them. They're collected on this series, which is called the Classic German Rock Scene. And the second albums were Rache, that's Rache, and Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, I think it was called. So that's them. That's the 2 of them collected here. This is a United Artists gatefold double album, which contains both of those particular albums. And they're very different. The first album, Rache, is very different from Opal. It doesn't have any guitar. It's very heavy on mellotron, and the mellotron is provided by Jimmy, the guy who was in Amundul, Jimmy Johnson, I think was his name. He was also in Tangerine Dream, I think, if it's the same dude. No guitars at all on it, and a lot of Santana kind of percussion on this as well. And there's a lot of flutes as well, so it gives it kind of a heavy sound, a very kind of almost Jethro Tull kind of sound with slight prog edges to it. So that's Rache. The same year they released Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, I think it was called, and this is also in this album, and that's very different again. It kind of harks back to the first album without the psychedelic edges. It's got 2 brilliant long tracks on side 2, One of them is called The Sun Song, and the other is called Forgotten Sea. Now, Forgotten Sea was reworked a couple of years later on the Steakhouse album, and it was called Dreaming Girls. So totally different sounding track, but based on the same template. So again, this one is full of guitar, and it doesn't have any keyboards at all. So two completely different, almost schizophrenic releases contained into one package. And this classic German rock scene was a brand that was used. They did compilations for Can, and they did ones for Amon Düül as well. But I've got another one of them, which I think I've shown before, which is Niagara, and this one collects the first two LPs by Niagara. So that's definitely worth checking out as well. And these comps you can pick up relatively cheap. I think this one was maybe 15, and maybe that was €20, that is. So maybe $23-24 each, approximately. So you can pick them up pretty cheap. And they are original issues from the early 1970s. And in 1973, Embryo released their fourth album, which is called Steakhouse. And this one was released on the third label that they were involved with, which is called Brain. And this is not the original copy. It was originally issued in 1973. This one came out in, the one that I've got here is a late 1970s reissue, also on Brain, but it's not the Metronome Brain. It's on the Rock and Brain imprint of that particular label. And this is very much an improvised jamming session. Mal Waldron, the famous legendary American jazz pianist, joined them and composed 3 of the tracks for this one, including his own track, The Call. But this one again features very ethnic elements. Radio Marrakesh is obviously got North African aspects to it. Jimmy Jackson rejoined the band. He was on their second album, Racha, and he rejoined them for this one. So the Mellotron does make a reappearance on this album, even though it had been absent on their third release, Father, Son and the Holy Ghost. It makes a welcome re-emergence here onto this particular one. And this, my favourite track of this one is, first of all, obviously the track The Call is a wonderful improvised track. But Dreaming Girls, the closing song on side 2, is a beautiful sedate number, extremely relaxing track. So a very, very strong entry into their collection, Steakhouse. And their fifth album is also released on the Brain label, and this one is called Rock Session, which I've shown before as well. And this is very much a sister album to Steakhouse. Indeed, they were recorded in the same year. Legend has it that when the group were presenting their session work to their label, which was the label at that time, which was United Artists, that United Artists deemed that the work that was contained in these two particular sessions was uncommercial and unrepresentative of their sound, and therefore Burchard decided with his cohorts to take it to Brain. So you had a unique situation that they were now on their fourth label in their first 3 years of existence. And actually, I think Brain got the best of their works, because as good as Father, Son and Holy Ghost is, I think Steakhouse and Rock Session are both better. Both of these are very improvised and jamming albums, you could say, with extended solos of in organs, guitars, saxophones, and violins even, and they're really jamming their ass off in these particular ones. Mal Waldron is back on board for this particular session. He plays keys, and Jimmy Jackson also plays organ in this one as well, and mellotron. So it's got its proggy aspects to it as well. The track Dirge is very well known track, and Warm Canto is just a magnificent piece of work. So two very strong albums released back to back, both recorded in the same year as Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, Steakhouse, and Rock Session, all recorded with 3 different session bands in the same particular calendar year. All worth getting. And also, at the tail end of 1973, after being kicked off the United Artists roster because of their defection to, and also because of the success of the 2 releases on the Brain label, they were dispatched promptly to a major label, which is BASF, and they only released 1 album on that particular label, and it was their fourth label in their 3 years of existence. And that album was called We Keep On, featuring Charlie Mariano. And this is, I'm proud to say, is an original German pressing BASF first issue with a beautiful, evocative cover and stunning music contained within this particular release. Again featuring this one features Charlie Mariano. And I cannot discuss Charlie Mariano without going on a short segue here. I've shown this quite a few times now. This is his collaboration with Wolfgang Downer on Mood Records in about 1985, I think. It's certainly in the mid-1980s. This one is called Meditations on the Landscape, which is basically an exploration of Tagore, the famed Indian poet-philosopher. Magnificent piece of work. Just stunning piece of work. Meditation on the Landscape. So please check that one out if you're not familiar with it. But I just couldn't resist that little segue. But this album is just stunning as well. So after releasing the 2 instrumental jammy albums, they came back to their strength, which was the ethnic kind of aspects of their sound. And this one features very heavily African and Indian percussion and instrumentation. There's quite a number of ethnic tracks on this particular one. The track No Place to Go is a furious number. It goes on for 12.5 minutes, 200 miles an hour. It's just full on. But an absolutely stunning album, this one. And if you can get it, there is a CD version of this as well with a 16-minute unreleased track called Ticket to India, which I've got digitally, which is just phenomenal as well. I'm not quite sure how it didn't make it onto this album, and they should have perhaps made it into a double album. But a beautiful album, and it's probably the highlight of their career, but certainly one of them. In 1975, Embryo released their 7th album. This one is called Surfin'. It was released on an imprint of the BASF label. This is a highly varied album with mostly with dull moments, but 1 or 2 shining moments. In particular, the track called Dance on Some Broken Glasses, but other than that, it was relatively forgettable. Released this album at the tail end of 1975 called Bad Heads and Bad Cats, and I've shown this one before as well. And that's the April label. This label eventually went on to become, I think it was Schneeball or Schnibble or something like that, and that's the one that the Risa album is released on. This one I'm lucky to get signed. This is actually a signed copy, signed by Charlie Mariano, by Burchard himself, and by Rowan Bunka. So I was lucky to get this one off an Austrian collector a couple of years ago. But this album is kind of very patchy. It doesn't really sit well with me. There's some decent moments. I like two songs in it, the two kind of ethnic ones, Nina and Klondike Nettie. And those apart, this is a highly forgettable album, to be frank. And their ninth album was also released on the April label. It's called Live, with probably a contender for one of the worst artwork ever. But the back isn't too bad. That should perhaps have been the front. But look at that. That's just dirge. That's just terrible, terrible work. This is kind of murkily recorded. It has there's fine playing on it. It features some tracks from the Bad Heads album. I know After the Rain appeared in that particular one, but it's okay. You know, it's well played, but the recording I think was a bit poor. So that was their ninth album, and this one is called Live. It's the only live album that I have by Embryo. And their 10th album was also released on April, and this one is called Apocalypso. So this is the third release that they had released on the April label. And yeah, it's kind of it's curious album. It continues their penchant for fusion and for ethnic world music, but it also incorporates aspects of funk, which are very some really decent tracks on this. Actually, I've kind of a love-hate relationship with this album. Sometimes it hits me, other times it doesn't. Again, an absolutely shocking cover in this particular one. What's good in this? Well, Nasty Funk is passable. Cod features a whole series of beautiful flute solos, so well worth checking out. Actually, you know, if you can see it for decent enough money, try it. Try before you buy. Caveat emptor. So that was their 10th album. Their 11th album is one that I'm looking for, which is called Risa, which continues their infatuation with the Indian subcontinent and incorporates further aspects of that particular culture into their music. So that's it, VC. That's all I've got of Embryo. I've a decent enough stack of their work, particularly from the 1970s, which were the halcyon days for them, I believe. For anyone that's interested on going on a journey on the Embryo journey, you can't go wrong with anything that they released from their second right through to their sixth album. And beyond that, definitely check out the live album At a Push, Apocalypso, and certainly check out their 11th album, Embryo's Risa, which I don't have, but I know that it's a phenomenal album. I've heard it digitally and I've got it digitally, but I don't have it in any tangible form. The one to get would be the vinyl copy of it because it comes with a booklet, which basically covers the journey that they went on to through the Indian subcontinent, and it makes for a fascinating historical document, if nothing else. But certainly you cannot go wrong with anything from their second album, which is Raka, right through to Father, Son, Holy Ghost, We Keep On, Rock Sessions, Steakhouse. You can't go wrong with any of those albums. They come with a money back guarantee. Buy them. If you don't like them, I'll pay for them. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching.